Hey guys, what's up? This is Alex Duque. Welcome back with another tutorial. Today we're talking about UV mapping. And I'm going to start with the very basics of UV mapping. Anytime you make an object here, like let's say a polyplane, anytime you make an object, any sort of poly object particularly, but any object in general, it will have a UV layout. UV layout can be thought of as like if you ever see an animal, and sometimes when they use like an animal for a rug, then you'll see like it's kind of like stretched out, like the legs and stuff. You know what? I'll just kind of like draw it here. Probably easier for me to explain it. Okay, so if I have this, I'm just gonna assign a little material here. Assign new material, Lambert, and I'm just gonna make a little texture. Okay, so whenever you see like one of those rugs, they kind of look like this. You see like the animal's leg over there, all stretched out, and then like over here, the belly, and then like the other leg, all stretched out, and maybe like the tail back there, and then like the other leg over there, and then like the other leg over there, and then like the head. So I don't know if you ever seen something that looks kind of like that, like one of those animal rugs. But you know, if that animal was in 3D, then it would actually have form. This is just like taking the skin of the animal off and unwrapping it. So it can be thought of as like a 2D version of anything that revolves around an object. That's what a UV is. So if I make a polyplane, for example, you can actually look at the UV window, the UV layout of an object by opening up the UV texture window. And that's going to be under Window, UV Texture Editor. So you'll see the little window here. Let me just place this in the right view here. So what that is, it's a 2D representation of this 3D object. Now, yeah, point taken. This is a very simple 3D object, so it's pretty straightforward. But, you know, if I had like a cube, then you'll see that this is the default UV layout. It's like the unfolded version of that. So like, you know, if there was a scratch going all the way through there, then, you know, that would go and transfer through. It's a 2D version of the 3D version. You gotta think of it as that. And every primitive that you make will have that. This would be a 2D version of this 3D version. So you have a face here on top, another one here on the side, and something that revolves around, which is this guy over there. If I made a torus, then the torus will have something that looks like this. This one's a little harder to explain, but it's the same thing. If I select an edge, say across my object here, that's the face right there. And then this would be the ones that go vertical, horizontally. And so on and so forth. So every object that I'm making, every primitive that I'm making by default comes with a UV window, a UV layout. Now let's make a polycube, since it's the easiest one to explain for starters. So it has this basic UV layout. Now what it is that each one of these faces would be each one of the faces of the actual object. The question would now be, which face on this 3D object would be the face on the 2D version of it. If you select the face on your object, you'll see which face gets selected on the UV window. Alright? Now as far as components go, so like see, every time I go selecting, then one of those is going to get selected. Now as far as objects or selection in Maya, you have components, and components can be thought of like the pieces that actually make up the shape. You have faces that you should know, you have vertices that you should also know, you have edges that you should also know, and then you have UVs, which are sort of like they're where the verts are in the same place. But the main difference between a vertex and the UV is that the vertex you cannot move in UV space. The UV you can move in 3D space. Yeah, I can move it now. Alright? and you would want to move it to adjust. Now right now when I make this, everything is fine, but we're gonna eventually assign a texture and make an extrude, and you'll see that then everything begins to not work. So if I extruded this, theoretically that face should be looking kind of like that, and as you can see, it's not really doing anything of that sort. So we'll get into that later. Anyway, so point of the story for now is you can select UVs, okay? And those are the guys that you're going to move in UV space. Now, at the same time, if you look at this shape, although in 3D all the edges are connecting to each other, in the UV window they're not. This edge is, that edge is connecting, that edge is connecting, this edge is connecting, that edge is connecting. But this edge, that, and this edge, and this edge, they're not connecting to directly to another edge. See, when I select this edge, it's going to select the edge that would correspond to that one. If I select this edge, you'll see that it'll select the one that corresponds to that one. If I select this one, that would be the one that corresponds. This one's the one that corresponds. That's the one that corresponds, and so on and so forth. So there's two types of edges, if you want to think of it like that. There's, as far as UV goes, there's connected edges and not connected. Now you can actually show them so that you can distinguish them in the UV window. Now here in the UV window, you'll find a whole bunch of buttons on top, and those are just like hotkeys, like the shelf, to access certain things. If, for example, you click this icon right there, then you can show the texture border edges, and anything that gets thick is those edges that are not connected to each other. Usually you get a seam in those areas, so you can see what's happening there. Okay. Now sometimes you might want to connect them, and if you want to connect them, you just select an edge and you click on Move and Saw UV Edges or Saw UV Edges. If you go Polygons, Move and Saw UV Edges, it's going to move and saw those. Or if you just saw them, then it's also going to saw them. So now they used to be separate, now they're together, and you can do the same with another one. Now there's these two little icons here, which would be this guy and that guy, and what they do is that the first one would move UV edges, and the second one would move and saw UV edges. There's a slight difference between them, which I might explain later, but in short, this guy is simply gonna move them, like, I'm sorry, he's simply gonna saw them, and the other guy is going, right now there's not multiple shells, but the other guy is actually gonna move one shell and connect it to the other. Now, just as you can saw UV edges, you can also cut UV edges. If I select this edge and I click on the scissors, it's gonna cut it. Now right now what you have is called two shells. This top, which is the top shelf, and this bottom, which is the bottom shell. So you actually have two shells, and they're both constrained within this 0 to 1 space, and that's how the UV texture window behaves. It thinks of it places the objects within the 0 to 1 space. So you don't want to have your objects past that, because otherwise, like if this object was like that, then this part of the object would overlap with whatever I had as far as the texture goes down there. Let's make a little exercise here. If I got these texture border edges there, and you can draw, you can paint on a 3D object by assigning a new material to it, and then you can go ahead and go into the rendering menu and then hit texturing 3D paint tool, and that's what it's going to do. Is instead of me going back and forth in Photoshop and this, it's going to paint everything within Maya. So that's what that 3D paint tool is for. And you're going to paint color, so I'm just going to assign edit textures. I'm going to make it a small texture. And now if I paint, I'm just going to go ahead and paint that. And if you want to undo, it usually takes 3 undos per undo. So I'm going to write here, I'm just going to call this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, oops, phase 3, there we go, phase 4, phase 5, and phase 6. And when you look at the UV window, this allows you to see what we just made as far as the texture goes. So you can see that phase 3 is in the center of phase 3, and phase 2 is on that side, and phase 4 is on that side. This is a good way to identify. And you can even draw like little arrows so that you know, like for example, what is in the top. And this is going to allow me to explain, like if I drew a line from here to there like that, I'm just going to do an arrow, and now I'm going to do another one from phase 1 to phase 5 like that, and then another one from phase 2 to phase 5, and then another one from phase 4 to phase 5. And you can see here what pretty much happens. See where phase 4 and phase 2, you can see the beginning of the line there and the continuation of the line there. Now if you made this in Photoshop, then you would have to manually go moving this to the sides until it actually did a perfect match with that connection. And that's where you're going to end up having seams. And you can see a little bit of a seam right there actually. You can see how this is not like perfectly straight, unlike let's say phase 3 to phase 5. See, phase 3 to phase 5, they go perfectly because they were joined, or even phase 1 to phase 5, everything's perfect because they join. But there's a seam from phase 2 and phase 4 to phase 5 because they're not connected. And you can see it right there, and probably you can also see it right here as well. You can see a slight seam there. So those are called seams. Okay, so the idea is when you actually make on-wrap, you want to have seams in areas that are not too visible. So like in the case of a head, for example, you might want to have it like in the back of the head. But you know, the idea is that you will get seams and you gotta hide them somehow. But some other times you can change them. Now I'm going to change the UV layout, and therefore the actual texture is going to change. We select, for example, the top shelf. If you control right click, you can switch it over to shell, and I move that shell up. You can see that now phase 1 is here and phase 5 is here. Phase 1 and phase 6. Phase 1 and phase 6 is here. But if you look at the actual object, this phase is kind of like an empty space. It's actually not. It's actually tiling itself. See where phase 3 is. And that's the way that the UV window works. And you can actually see it here in these little guys. It's repeating itself every 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to minus 1, 0 to 1, 0 to minus 1, 0 to minus 1, 0 to 1, 0 to minus 1. It repeats every time. This is like a Cartesian plane, so you know you're always gonna have a 0 in the middle, 1, 1, negative 1, and negative 1. And the point here is that it will repeat every time. Okay, so you gotta make sure that you keep your meshes inside of that 0 to 1 space, so that you don't have repeating textures. Now, as I said, there was like if you let's select this top shell, and if you move it up, then you'll see what's happening right there. There's like a gap between these two, and theoretically they should be connected. So if you select that edge and you hit that edge, is actually also selecting this edge, and if you hit move edges, it's only gonna find the middle ground between these two edges and solve them like that. So it's gonna get some like weird shapes. You can see like the let's see, like the F3 it's kind of like changing form. It's not too precise or too noticeable, but you can actually see on the arrow there's more of an arrow now and there's less of an arrow before. So the move is just gonna move them. It's just gonna like find, move and saw. It's gonna find the middle ground between two edges and saw them. Move and saw, what it's gonna do is it's gonna find the shells and it's gonna move the whole shell one to the other. It's gonna move the smallest shell to the biggest shell, but since they're both the same, It's just gonna move one of them to the other. So you can see how that one didn't have any distortion, it just moves the whole thing. So like my 3 looks the same, and as far as the position, the shape of my 5 looks the same. Now, if you change the actual shape of your UV layout, you might end up getting squashing or stretching. That's because, let's put it this way, let's look at that F5. See how that's stretching like really nasty? It's because it's fitting that amount of texture into this square, and the shape, the face, the actual geometry is not the same as far as proportions go as the UV representation of it. So if you want to have like perfectly nice looking textures so that they don't stretch or squash or anything like that, you're gonna have to make sure that all your faces are exactly the same shape, or as close as possible, as their actual geometry. And that can get a little tough at times. There are ways around it though. One of them is by making a saw like this one. See, so I have to sacrifice having seams, but at half perfect. Like the faces are all like perfectly identical to the actual geometry. The UV and the face are all identical. I have to have seams to have that. But if I don't want to sacrifice seams, for example, if I actually wanted, let's say, F5, F1, F2, F3, and F4 all to be together, and F6 to be different, so I want to change the actual UV layout of this, I would have to go ahead and start cutting faces. So I can select this edge and I can select that edge, and with the cut you can cut them, and then as well cut this one too. Select F2, control right click to shell. That's going to select the whole shell. I'm going to move that over to, what is it that I want to do? F5, F4. Okay, so F5 will be here, F4 will be there, F3 will be there, and F1 will be there. Now, these are all pretty much there. It's just they're not like perfect. First of all, they're not sawn, they're not together. You can see the hard edge there. And second of all, they're not like perfectly lined up, so you might want to line them up perfectly. If you move at UV edges, it's gonna distort them like that. Actually, see, there's not perfectly connected. Let's see what's going on here. Let's put this UV shell over here. Let's put that UV shell over there. Let's select the edge for F5. Okay, so that would be this one. So what face is that one? Is this face? Okay, so if I select this edge, it's selecting the side edge. See, if I select the top edge, and that edge is this edge. This brings us to another tool. This little tool, guys. You can rotate UVs. So if you select that whole shell or those 4 UVs, you can rotate them in 45-degree increments. So now there they are, they connect. And then you can, if you just move them, you're gonna get distortion. So you might as well just move and saw them, and then one's gonna move and saw into the other one. And then you can do the same with the other one. So if I select this edge, that edge would actually represent this. So if I select this edge, I see that it's that edge. And here's another way, because if I selected those and just rotate them like that, then it would work. But I want to talk about another tool, which is the flip U and flip V. Think of V as vertical. So this would flip vertical and this would flip horizontally. But sometimes it's hard to figure out what you're doing because you don't know which way they're heading. That's why you have this little cool icon here. That cool icon allows you to shade the actual objects, the actual UV, so I can see everything blue. And if it's red, that means that they're not heading in the right direction. They're facing the wrong direction. So a texture would be inverted. If I come here to the F5, see how it's like upside down or flipped? If I flip it again, then it looks like that, but then it's still rotated. So you can get an idea of what's happening there. You can actually flip it and flip it, and those two flips would end up, let's see what connects what to where. Okay, so I'm selecting this top one, and if I flip it down, then now this edge would connect with that edge. And if I flip it horizontally, it's still going to do the same thing, except that now it's all blue. And then you can rotate it 45 degrees, and then you can connect them. And again, if you move them, then you're going to get distortion, so move and saw is probably a good idea. Now, if you look at this, well, when I'm here kind of far away, let's find an angle. There. I don't know if you can see that they're kind of like not in a perfectly straight line. They're kind of like offset a little bit. If you select all your UVs and you click on any of these guys, what they're going to do is they're going to line up to the outermost. So this one would line all those UVs to the outermost left. This one would line them up to the outermost right. This one would line them up to the outermost bottom, and this one would line them up to the outermost top. So like if I did the left, then they're all gonna go into that one. So you don't want to do that one. But if you do it to the top, they're all gonna like straighten out. Top or bottom, they're gonna straighten out. And then you can do the same on this one. So just line them up. And we get a little seam here, so we might as well saw it. And there we go. And now we can select another edge right here for EF6, and we can cut that one. And then we have ourselves another shell there. Now, if I put this shell here on top, you can see what happens when you have shaded. That's called overlapping UVs, because what's happening on the face here on F5 and what's happening on the face of F1 right here on this guy is also happening because of the placement. See, so if I move the UV, then I'm changing its placement. So we just want to put it kind of like somewhere. Let's just put it kind of like here on the side for now. Alright. So that's something you can do, and once you have this, then you might want to like get rid of your texture or make a new texture. So I'm just gonna go back into the 3D Paint tool. I'm just gonna flood. There we go. So it's all the same tone. And just save textures. Okay, so I haven't saved my scene, so I'm going to save my scene as UVs, and come back to that 3D Paint tool and save textures. So now this is like that. And now, if I wanted to paint something that goes all the way around this 4 and up to that top one without any seams, that's actually going to be able to be done now. And I'm actually going to use something that has some sort of texture on it. Oops. Just going to make this brush smaller. Okay, let's use another brush. Pretty much no seams on that area, but you can be doing all this stuff in Photoshop. Okay, there's no seams from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here. There are seams, however, from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here, because those guys are not merged. Now, in real life, if I would be limited to that's it. I mean, that's as good as it can get as far as a box can do. That's pretty much as good as it's gonna get. However, in Maya, you can get a little bit further. I can say, well, I can select this edge over here, and it's gonna merge it to this edge, and then I can select this one and it's going to merge it to that edge, and I can select this one and it's going to merge it to that edge, and I can select this one and it's going to merge it to that edge, and then I'm going to end up getting something kind of like this. Now the good thing about this is that now there's absolutely no UV edges. The bad thing though is that I'm getting a lot of stretching and squashing because the positions are not, they're not identical. So with something as limited as this, I would say that's as good as it's gonna get. But let's talk a little bit about some extra tools that you have. You have two options: relax and unfold. And if you click this little icon here, you actually have an interactive unfold and an interactive relax. You can go playing with those, but if you do it, like if you overdo it, then you're gonna get overlapping stuff. You're gonna do that. And like I said, this is a limited shape, so it's kind of like, I don't think we can do anything more than what we're getting here. Let's try scaling this up and see. Yeah, that's as far as it's gonna get. Well, let's go ahead and make another shape that's a little bit more complicated. Let's make alright, let's make a sphere. Okay, so if you make a sphere, the UV texture window would end up looking like this. If you look at the hard edges, you'll see that those edges are all hard. If you look at them here, you'll see that the top, all these top guys, they're all like that, and on the bottom they're all not merged. And the reason why they're not is because that would be the best way, so that there's no distortion on the geometry. There's going to be a little bit, because if you look at the shape of these guys and you compare it to the shape of these guys, they're not like the same. But that's as basic as it's going to get. You can, however, make your own type of mapping. And let's simplify this shape. Let's just have it, I'm going to have it have 5. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to make it like that. Say 8, 5, and 8. Okay, yeah, there we go. So 6 maybe? 5, 6, 6. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna give this 6 faces. Now let's suppose that this was a head. Okay, so you're gonna bear with me here, because I don't want to make it a complicated shape. So if we were to just extrude these guys in like that, actually let me keep faces together off, make an extrude again. So you got eyes there, and then you have a mouth. I'm going to keep faces together on and extrude again. So you got yourself a very simple looking face. Okay, now this looks like that, and it, as you can see, I cannot see my faces or my mouth there. Now what I would have to do is make my own mapping, and there are different types of basic mapping in Maya. If you go to polygons in the create UVs, you got planar, cylindrical, spherical, automatic, and based on the camera. If I do planar, for example, let me just reset my settings here. If I make a planar, then it's going to project from an axis, and it's going to be like a straight projection onto that object. Now, if you look at the UVs, then you're going to end up getting something that looks kind of funky. If I rotated this 90 degrees, 45 degrees, I'm going to make my projection again. It's projecting it from the side like that. You say, yeah, that's great. But the problem is that if you make a texture, or if you assign a texture to this, I'm going to assign that one, then what you get on this side, you're also going to get on the opposite side. Alright, so that might work to an extent, but there you go. You can really see what's happening right there. So they're going from the center outwards, because everything that's down there is now flipped. And if you look at the shaded version, remember that I said that blue was good, red is bad, and purplish like this means that you have overlapping blue and red. So what you want to do is you want to like fix that and get rid of that. And what you can do is you can cut seams into your mesh. If you like, again, if you select some edges, let's say like that, and then you did the cut, then you're gonna get a cut there. Of course, I did it in the wrong place, so I'm gonna do it in the right place. There we go. So if you make a cut, it's gonna make a little seam there. Now, this image is projecting from the side, and that might not be the ideal thing, because if you're gonna texture like a head, like the eyes and the mouth, then maybe what you want to do is you make a projection from the front. Maybe I'm just gonna rotate this so it's projecting from the front like that. Or maybe, because if I do that, then the back is overlapping. So you can also, instead of making a planar projection, you can make something like a cylindrical projection. So the cylindrical is sort of like projecting like a cylinder onto that mesh. So it's sort of like gonna unwrap. You can see how that type of unwrapping happens. So like the sides are great, but the edges over there, they're kind of like stretching really bad because they look nothing like this. They look really stretched out. And I can project it a little bit more so that it changes its form, but the idea is that they look like the actual geometry. So this would be a closer representation than this. See how that is stretched out, and here it's not stretched out like that or squashed like that. Anyway, and then you also have other types of projections like the spherical mapping. So in this one, we're going to do almost the same, but you can get a better sense of dimension of it, except that it's bigger than that 0 to 1 space, so you might want to make it smaller so it actually fits your 0 to 1 space. If you look at the texture here, I know it's a funky texture, but it's really not stretching or anything like that, except maybe in those areas over there, because that would be this. And a little bit, if I made this like that, for example, so it's more accurate, then if you look at this particular stroke or shape or thing that I did, it looks pretty much the same on the geometry as it does on the UV window. So that would be like, it's a more accurate representation of this face, because if I made it really squashed like that, then it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. Or if I made it the opposite, then it just tiles itself and repeats itself a whole bunch of times. So again, just keep in mind that the proportions of this have to be equal to the proportions of that. And that's when sometimes you might end up getting some issues, and you might want to do either multiple projections, like for example, I can make a planar projection from the top or from the front for the faces that I see here on the front, and then another one from the side for the ones that I see here on the side, and then another one from the back for the ones that I see on the back, and then another one from the opposite side for the ones I see on the opposite side. So that's something that, it's like a standard approach that you would do, would be multiple planar projections, just to get a basic idea of what you want to do. But I still have this little cool little seam there, back there on the back of the head, and there's some extra tools that you can use, which are called relax and unfold. Now this little icon does that. So if I click on that, that would be like an interactive unfold. I need to select UVs to do it. There we go. And if I click unfold, and see how it's trying to unfold this mesh interactively, and if I do relax, then it's going to try to relax it interactively. So you want to like sometimes unfold and relax to get a more relaxed out mesh. But here now, there's no there's no overlapping. Everything's nice and blue and pretty, and the proportions are relatively the same size as that of the actual geometry. Now that's the interactive version, but just because you have an interactive version doesn't mean that that's all you have. You can also do that manually here through relax and unfold. So if you do the unfold option box, you have this little window. You can change the stopping threshold so it unfolds a little or unfolds a lot. So if I make it like that, you can unfold very little. And if I make it like that, then it's going to unfold a lot. Okay. And just as that, you can pin, you can pin whatever's selected or whatever's unselected. You can pin the borders, for example. So it's only going to relax and keep the borders there. You can unfold vertically only, or you can unfold horizontally only. So you got some options there. And it just takes playing with it to figure out what you want. Just keep in mind what I already said. Try to make the shape look as close as possible as the actual geometry. If you're able to do that, then you're going to be safe. And sometimes that might require doing some extra cuts besides just having one seam. So like, for example, make another seam, say, I don't know, suppose I made a seam here, and here, and there, and here, and here. There we go. There. And then another one down here. Just gonna cut those. So if I try to do an unfold now, the unfold is gonna be a little bit different. And unconstrain it. So, you can play with all these values until you get an unfold that you want. So I'm unfolding and relaxing with that interactive one, and now I'm sort of like getting something that's a little bit more accurate. I can even saw this seam there in this one. And now this area here, it's just like faces. This area here is a little bit more accurate as far as how it pertains to the actual shape. And this one is kind of like more accurate as far as to how this looks. And this one's not so accurate yet, but you can go ahead and make it more accurate. You can even make your own projection and then saw them. For example, like I can make a planar projection here and just tell the planar projection to come from the bottom. You project from the bottom up. Just scale it up like that so that it says circles, so I'm just going to scale it 1 on 1. And that's what I'm going to end up with. I'm going to switch that selection to UVs, move it down here, and select the an edge, and figure out what edge is that connecting to. That one's connecting to this edge, that one's connecting to this edge. So I can now say polygons, move, and saw UV edges. I'm going to keep that form connected to the other one, and now I get a better unfold as far as that particular area goes. So I'm sacrificing a couple of extra seams there, but if I go ahead and assign a new material, and again I'm skipping the Photoshop part just to be quick about this tutorial, but if I go and again back into the rendering, texturing 3D Paint tool, and assign it textures, yep. So if I start painting some eyes here, with a brush that's normal, and then his mouth, there's, I don't know, something, right? Or her mouth. And a little nose there, whatever. And then maybe some eyebrows. Maybe some hair. I'm just going to change this brush to, I don't know, that or this one. Yay! So it's a funky looking person. So bear with me there, but point here is that as I'm doing this, there's really not that much stretching or squashing or anything like that. There will be a couple of seams in the areas that where there's seams, where there's those edges that are not connected, which is happening over here. But aside from that, it's really not that many. It's a he, she. It's an executive transvestite. Okay, so you get the point here. So you can see the seam right there on the back. but as far as it stretching or squashing is not really happening, and that's the whole idea here. Alright, so it takes a lot of experimentation to get something like this. You know what, I'm just gonna delete that. That sucks. But I hope you get the point. Now, one way that you can check and see if your UVs are well, and okay, actually, let me do something. I'm gonna go ahead and model something. Okay, I'm gonna make it a little bit more complex. So I'm gonna, I don't know, it's whatever comes out. I don't know what's gonna come out. So I'm gonna extrude over here. Extrude over here. Okay, so it's looking like an animal. Okay, so extrude that over there. Extrude that over there. I'll extrude this back there. Like a little tail or something. And then one more extrusion. Okay, and then I'm just gonna make another extrude. Actually, I'm just gonna give it a couple of edges like that, and I'm gonna make a split like here. And please don't consider this a modeling tutorial, okay? Because it's definitely not. It's making a shape here of something. Because by extruding a whole bunch of faces, what I'm doing is I'm actually having really bad UVs. Okay, so I'm just making a little stupid looking shape. Alright, so just bear with me. Almost there. Okay, so we got the Loch Ness Monster or something like that. Okay, so got 4 legs and a head and tail. I'm just gonna make an extra split smack in the middle of this. Okay, so if you had something like this, and suppose that you were gonna texture this incredible shape, then your UV would suck, and that's because there's no UV layout. I mean, it's got the original from the cube, and then that's it. Everything else they did, it's lost. Now, if I assigned, let's say, a material, this one, and I gave this material a checker, I'm just gonna map it here. Then this is how my checker looks like. So it really doesn't look like anything, see? Because there's pretty much no UV layout. So what you need to do is you need to sort of like organize this. That would be the best way to start, by organizing it. So I'm just going to start by making a projection from the side. I'm going to have the UV window here on the side so you can see what's going to happen. So polygons, create UVs, planar mapping. And whenever you make a planar map, like I said, you can rotate it here or change its attributes on the channel box. If for any reason you lose your selection, as long as you have not deleted the history, when you select it, you'll find the polyplanar projection node there. And if you press T when you do that, T as in toy or the manipulator tool, then you will get this. So you can either click here to rotate it manually, or use the numerical input to place it manually. Now when I place this, that's how it looks like. Now the texture itself, if you look at it, the checkers, they're square. So they need to look square here. I'm just going to scale this down. If you look at them, they're not really square, they're more rectangular looking. That's because the texture is sort of like, or the shape of this object is kind of like out of proportion. So it's a good idea to make the width and the height the same number. So it's a square projection, and that's going to make everything sort of like even. You can select some UVs there and put them here, and there you go. Right, so I got myself a side projection there. Now, first thing that's happening is we get like purple and dark purple and a whole bunch of colors. So you need to find a way to fix that. And best way here would be to maybe break it in two. So I can select that whole edge loop that I made here across the middle and break it. So you can use the cut polygon tool. And then you have sort of like two shells. And if you cannot see your texture border edges, you can click on it so you can see them. And that way you'll see that there's a cut there. So now you have a left shell and a right shell, or a left shell and a right shell. So you can actually select one of the shells, and you can just click on one UV, then control right click, and in the perspective or in the UV window you can do this. Here you can say to shell, or in the perspective you can say to shell to UV shell. So you're going to select that whole shell and you can move it out of the way. Then you're going to see that there's like that type of thing going on. So like this top area is red, and this bottom area is kind of like bluish like that, because each one of these feet or legs, they got a front projection, but they also have the same front projection overlapping from the back. So we would have to, if we apply the idea what I said, try to find the best shape to match it. Then you can select this guys and that guy, and then you can ask yourself, well, what is the closest type of projection that looks kind of like this? Well, I would say it's a cylindrical projection. So I can go ahead and make a cylindrical projection, and it's gonna look kind of like that, and you might want to adjust it. So if you click here, you can rotate it so that it's kind of like the same angle, and then it's gonna be really huge here. And you can actually even, as I'm rotating, you can see what's happening interactively on the there. I'm just rotating it so that they're all blue. Makes my life easier. And then you can simply scale them down. Now move them to the side. It's definitely a good idea to move them to the side. And then it's a matter of figuring out, okay, so let's see. This bottom face is right there. And these faces are right there. And out of those faces, my seam is right here, which is that seam. And this face will be that face. Okay. So I want to move this face. I don't like how that looks. I actually want to put this face over there. So you might want to select an edge and cut it. Select the whole shell and move it over to the side. Select the edges that connect to each other and move and saw UV edges, like so. Ta-da! Okay. Now you can try the same approach on the other ones, or you can try a whole bunch of projections. Now I'm gonna just make my life easy, and I'm just gonna make a whole bunch of other cylindrical projections there. So I'm just gonna select that and make another cylindrical projection, and do the same thing. Select that node there, rotate it so it kind of looks like at the same angle. And I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get this shape there, so I'm just gonna rotate until I get something that looks like what I want. Then you can control right click to shell, select the UV, control right click to shell, scale that shell down, put it over here. Might as well cut this up, select that face, select that shell, move it over here, and move and saw UV edges. Same approach. Now if you move, then you're gonna get distortion, so move and saw UV edges doesn't give you that distortion. Yay! So there's another leg there. That was the legs for this guy over here. Now this face, which is that guy, I'm just gonna select this edge and that edge and that edge. Just gonna tell it, let's see if it works. Move and saw. Let's try saw. That's worst. Okay. We can select some UVs here. Manually move them down. As long as it's blue. Then if you actually select a vertex on the perspective, you'll see what vertex belongs to what vertex. So like if I select that vertex, I'll see that this vertex is being selected. If I select that vertex, I'll see that this vertex is being selected. So that means that this would have to be rotated. Let's try one more time. Select that vertex is this one, this vertex is that one, this vertex is that one, this vertex is that one. Now let me try and do that move and saw UV edges. Let's try just sawing them. Yeah, still doesn't work. So let's just move them. I can select this UV here and press V to snap, and it's gonna snap eventually. And this one's gonna snap, and this one's gonna snap, and then you can select those three and saw them. Yay! Alright, so we got sort of like an unwrapped leg. Now I'm not sure if this is the best unwrap in the world, but we'll eventually check and see if it is or if it isn't. We got this guy semi-unfolded. It's not really 100% unfolded because the top looks like that. So why don't we select some faces here on the top. Make a planar projection from that top. Okay, so we got those, and just gonna make a planar projection. 0 and -90. So it's projecting from the top. Make it square and big. And make it 5 by 5 width and height. To shell. There you go. UV to shell. So I'm just gonna move it up here. And this guy's over there. And you can see that there's an issue in regards to scale, so I'm just going to scale this so it tries to match the scale of that there. A little bit more. A little bit less. Okay. And then we can have yet another one for the bottom. In this case, we're not going to do the other half because this is going to be where like the cut happens. I'm going to add these two guys on there, since they're kind of like more from the top rather. Oops, I don't want you there. There we go. So again, create UVs, planar mapping. This time it's going to come from the bottom. 5 and 5. There we go. Just select those UVs. And they would be kind of like down here somewhere. So now you can begin to move and solve. So like this guy, and that guy would connect to each other, and that guy would also. So will that guy and this guy. Maybe even that guy. I'm just going to move and solve UV edges. Like that. And then here, here, and here. Same thing. Move and solve UV edges. Now. We might not want to have the bottom there. We might have it in a separate shell. Now let's see, what does this represent. This edge is that edge. This edge is that edge. and this edge is that edge. Interesting. So we have this edge, which would be that edge. This edge, which would be that edge. And this edge would be that edge. So you can see that this shape has nothing to do with that shape. So it's like you saw it, it's gonna get something weird, and you just move and saw, or just saw it, you're also gonna get something weird. What we're gonna do here is, actually, you know what? It would be a good idea to have an extra. This is too low geometry, so I'm just gonna have an extra edge going across the middle there. Makes life a little bit easier. Now, so let's select these faces. Those faces are this foot. So if we wanted to merge this guy, this guy, this guy, and that guy, those guys are this guys. Yeah, there we go. So we can make a cut there and select that shell and move it over here. Now we know that this guy and this guy and this guy and those guys not yet, but at least these two top guys definitely merge with those. Then we have this and this edge, which would be this and that edge. So this edge is that edge, and this edge is that edge. I'm just gonna make another cut here, right there, and select this whole shell, and then move it up here. Now this edge is that edge, and this edge is, what is that? This edge. Let's hide the textured water like this for a second. Okay, this edge is that edge, and this edge is that edge. So this face is what? And this face is what? Okay. So I'm just gonna make a cut smack here in the middle. Two shell and two shell. Let's see what we're getting here. Okay, so this edge is that edge, and this edge is that edge, and this edge is, I have no clue. Okay, that edge is like somewhere else. Let's just select these two and move and saw. What about just move? Just move and saw. You're gonna end up, see how that starts looking like it's coming out of him. And then this and that would do the same thing. There's a little bit of overlapping right there, so I'm just gonna fix that. And then this edge is that guy, and this edge is that guy, and this edge and that edge are those two, so I'm just gonna move and saw there. And there's our foot finally. And I know it's looking kind of funky, but eventually that will change. We'll see. Now, let's try and do the same thing here on the opposite side. So, like this and that, and cut it up. So like this shell, and then this, which is that, this, which is that. So these two are those two, so I'm just going to select those two and move and saw UV edges. That would go up there. And then this and this are, this is that, this is that, this is that. So make a cut here because they're kind of like reversed. Okay, so this is that, this is that, this is that. Just gonna move and saw UV edges there. Change the form a little bit. I'm gonna do something here. Just gonna broaden it up a little bit more. And then select this edge and that edge and move and saw UV edges. This edge. And again, there's a little bit of a weird shape there. So let's see. Everything's connected, hopefully. Just need to double check and see there's nothing missing. This one would connect with that bottom projection. This guy is going to wrap on the inside, so with that one, so there's the seams. And then you can actually, well, if it would be nice if I had the other half, but I'm kind of lazy to go ahead and do the other half. Just go ahead and flip this. And this half, I'm going to try something different and see if it works. I'm going to make a cut there, 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 and there. There, 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 and there. Now, just as you can cut on the window, on the UV window, you can also edit UVs, and you got those on here as well. So cut UV edges there and there. And I'm going to cut UV edges over here as well. Oh, I got a hotkey here, so I'm just going to do it through here. Just going to add a couple of edges to cut right there. And here as well. And there. So I'm just going to cut those as well. And on this shell, I'm going to try something else. I don't know, it's, usually with UVs, you got to try it out to know if it works. But let's see what happens. I'm going to select the UV here to shell. Just going to move that shell a little bit out of the way. And let's give this a shot. Let's relax and unfold. Hey, isn't that cool? That's another way of relaxing and unfolding. Now the thing though is, this is the top of the head, which is there. To shell, so I'm just going to flip it and flip it. Scale it up like that, and then I'm going to select this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and that 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 guy. I'm going to say move and saw UV edges. and you get something that looks kind of funky like that. And then you can try the interactive unfold and relax and unfold. And I know that the proportions are different because I screwed up there on the other one, but not didn't screw up, it's just I made the approach different. But there's a little skin looking thing. Now you can use these two tools, which are really handy. One is a lattice, so whatever UVs you have selected is going to behave like a lattice. So it's quick and easy. And then the other one is like the smudge tool. So you can go ahead and smudge anything that you need to fit your necessities. I can select like maybe a couple of UVs over here and use the lattice there. You can select points or you can select the actual edges themselves. I'll give this a bit of a rotation to make it a little bit more like the other side. And then that whole checker thing, if I repeat it, I'm going to repeat it 8 and 8 times. And if it looks a little ununderstandable, then I'm just going to make high quality. And the idea here is that they're all as even as possible. I know I don't have the best unfold here, but it's a geometry that doesn't have a lot of enough bases to make everything as even as possible, but we're still going to try. So just unfolding here, you can see how the shape tries to get as much of its rectangular form as possible. So you can see pretty much what's happening there. So now this is, the bottom is not, because I only did 1/2, I guess, or something. Yeah, like the other half is not mapped. I can just select those faces here. And then convert that to faces. Make a planar mapping. And probably matching this to that would be a bit tough. So I'm just gonna keep it as a separate element there. Put that there and put this completely unwrapped thing over there. And it kind of looks like what I was talking about early on, just kind of like a rug or a carpet thingy. And that's it. So with that, then that pretty much covered a whole bunch of things as far as UV mapping. I know it's a sucky shape, so don't blame me for the modeling skills. It's a simple tutorial, so it's supposed to be sucky. I wished I could do a little bit more to this, but then this tutorial would be really long and boring. It's just gonna be like me pushing and pulling CVs. I'm just gonna do it just for the hell of it, just a little bit. Now whenever I sculpt after having a UV layout, then it's probably a bad idea, because then those guys might end up stretching or squashing. However, there's a cool setting in 2009 whenever you move. You go to the move tool, it's called retain UVs. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Preserve UVs. If you do that, actually, what's gonna happen is that when I squash this like this, it's keeping the same UV layout. See how it's changing the actual geometry and the UVs? So that's kind of handy for minor tweaks, so that you don't mess up your UV layout. And now that we got something that's like that, then I might as well say 3D Paint tool, texturing 3D Paint tool, assign myself a cool little texture there, and I'm gonna flood it with a Nessy color. And you can use paint effects to paint on this. I'm just gonna give it a shot and see what happens. You know, worst thing that can happen is that it sucks more. So let's try flash animal. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna get out of the high quality mode. Okay, so we got our quick Nessy snake thing. So, you know, wherever I have overlapping UVs, which I'm sure I have like down here, I'm gonna paint in other areas as well. And this bottom part has stretching because it only had one plane of projection, which wasn't tweaked or anything. And there we go. El Sucky Nessy. El Cheapo Nessy. Alrighty, so high quality, and if you want to get crazy, I'm just going to save textures here. If you want to get crazy, you can even map a bump. I'm just going to repaint here. Okay, there we go. Now I'm not going to go ahead and do the tongue, although I would like to, so it looks creepier. I'm just going to save textures here, and close, and open the actual material. And we'll make a font. And there we go, El Nessy, El Bumpy Nessy. Anyway, so I hope that you got to understand a little bit about UVs. They're not really too complicated. It's just tweaking and playing with them to get them right. There's a whole bunch of tutorials and plugins to UV map, so it might be worth taking a look at them. Alright, so till next time, I'll see you. Good luck.